Hello and welcome to another edition of More Than the Score. This is Isolation TV. I'm Tony Moclair, and to prove how serious things are as we push towards the double-digit episode of this here vodcast, I've had a shave. That's great news and a big surprise to my co-host, one Troy Zantuck. G'day, Troy.
Oh, good to see you, Tone. And you got the facial fuzz off, mate, which is all the girls out there that are watching will be very happy about that.
Well, good on them. You know, they get their hormone-enriching dose of Tony Moclair every week here on More Than the Score as we talk. The golden era or the golden age of AFL, VFL. We are just lifelong fans. In your case, I'd say a word that's overused. I don't necessarily like the connotations, but you're a tragic, but I mean that in the best sense of the word, Troy. And you can see behind you the tomes of AFL statistics that you have spent a lifetime ingesting and memorising.
Yeah, you're spot on, Tone. I am a tragic, but I really had no choice, mate. I was born into a football family, so I copped it breakfast, lunch and tea. So I was a hostage to it.
Well, so this, I guess, vodcast is brought to you courtesy of your Stockholm Syndrome, but what the hell, just embrace it.
Yeah, Paddy Hurst.
Yeah, thank you. And, all right. So, Troy, what I thought we'd talk about today, football being so tribal, I'm very keen to get your thoughts on this. It is one of the last, I think, vestiges of socially sanctioned tribalism, where it's my team and the rest, go to hell. So I've often been struck by, how much, in my case, I will cheer for somebody who wears the navy blue. But then when they leave, it's not always the case, but when they leave, they are cut from the herd and sometimes cut from your affections. The exception to that, of course, is Eddie Betts. He returned to the fold. But players like Zach Tui, who I always liked at Carlton, and then he ups and leaves. I would cross the street to avoid Lockie Henderson, for example.
Okay.
So that's the tribalism in me coming out. So if it's bad enough for me, it must be very hard for players who have invested so much in a club, but for professional reasons choose to leave. And that's what we're talking about today, to go to another club. Yeah,
that's right, Tom. We're going to touch on the agony and the ecstasy of moving clubs. Obviously, the ecstasy, the contemporary ecstasy of moving clubs, you can point to Tom Lynch, Leon Prestia, Josh Caddy.
Yep.
All Gold Coast Suns, all played in a premiership last year. Obviously, Josh Caddy went to Geelong in between, but interestingly, all from a bottom club on their way to premiership glory, playing with the Tigers. So the transition there is interesting, playing in front of very small crowds, sparse crowds, then playing in, the showcase game of the AFL year on grand final day in front of 100,000. So it's an interesting transition, and it must be a roller coaster of emotions on that trip.
It really would be. And the boffins at AFL HQ staring at their readouts would be going, this was not in the predictions, because Gold Coast was supposed to be contesting grand finals, not Richmond. Had the plan gone as it should. So the central planning by the commissars at the AFL didn't quite work out there, did it?
No, it's all part of the recipe for baking a great cake, and Richmond have done that absolutely magnificently, Zumbo style. They've, the cake that they've baked has been just a superb cake over the last 3 or 4 years, and a lot of that credit has to go to Damien Hardwick. He was on his last legs at Richmond, and suddenly he pulled a rabbit out of a hat, and yibbida 2 premierships later, he's a super coach.
Well, that kind of segues very nicely to players who stuck fat, to use a Wayne Britton term, stuck fat with their club, when they could have easily been lured to other clubs. Richo. I mean, I've often I wondered how Richo would have felt in 2017. He's such a decent human being. He's such a good bloke. But geez, there would have been some churn going on in the inside as that Premiership Cup was hoisted aloft in 2017. He would have had offers to go. I know his father played for the club, but nonetheless,
Yep, Bull Richardson.
He was there in some dark days and didn't leave, and that's always a remarkable example, I think.
Yeah, to borrow a song line from The Verve, it was a bittersweet symphony for Richo. Yep. Obviously, playing all these years, played in a few finals with the Tigers, but most of that time, they weren't playing finals. He was the spearhead. A lot fell on his shoulders. But I think the unbridled joy that I saw on grand final day, that first grand final when the Tigers got the chocolates, he was crying tears of joy. Yeah. So, as you said, a magnificent human being. And what a wonderful player he was for the Tigers, kicking up, 800 goals. It's an enormous effort when the delivery wasn't as good as it should have been.
I was going to say, it was, the German term Schadenfreude.
Yes.
That's what you experienced watching Richo just drop. Yeah. Well, no, I think it applies to any fan or anyone. Well, probably not Richmond supporters, but watching the great man drop his bundle at that poor delivery, you just have to think if that delivery was better, what his final tally would have been. It's quite remarkable. So you mentioned, you set that up, the idea of the establishment club, or the new franchise club.
Yeah.
In the old club, and that's exactly the same journey that Nathan Buckley took
yes.
from Brisbane to Collingwood. Unlike Tom Lynch et al. That you just mentioned, he's never ended up putting any kind of premiership medallion in the trophy cabinet.
No, and the irony there is that the two grand finals that Buckley played in, the Brisbane Lions,
yeah,
you got the chocolates, and obviously, it's a well-worn statement that they won those three flags in a row, and they're etched into football history. Those great teams of the early 2000s. And obviously Nathan Buckley went to Collingwood to play in front of big crowds with that gold nugget waiting in the background that, yeah, hey, they'll be successful eventually. Yeah. I'll get the grand finals. Obviously, a Brownlow medal, he's got that in his kit bag, numerous Copeland trophies.
Yeah.
But the one, just that one nagging, well, it's the ultimate prize, that premiership medallion. He just failed in getting it. But a wonderful player, terrific player. But I feel that it's an unfulfilled ambition, and knowing what Nathan Buckley's like, I think that burns very deep. But
I hope it's not his final thought on his deathbed. That's the thing, the hole in his life he was unable to fill. Can you? This has been bugging me because I've been trying to find something out about it. Now, his wife ran a boutique in South Yarra. Is that right?
Yes, was it a shoe boutique?
Thank you. Now, Am I right, Troy, in believing that Nathan Buckley helped out there and worked there?
There's no doubt about you. Your research is absolutely impeccable. There's a gig at the Pons Institute for you. Make no mistake about it, Tony Moclair. Yeah, Tanya, she loved her shoes and had the boutique, and I think Nathan might have had the Brannock device out on occasion. fitting shoes.
I'm not now. Good on her. She gave it a crack. But I just had this image of a remake of Married with Children with Nathan Buckley.
Al Bundy.
Al Bundy. That's right. And
what a great show.
It was a great show. There's Bucks, coming home. He's just a beaten man, and he's just insulting the customers. And
in a shoe store, it's it's par for the course in insulting the customers.
Anyway,
great memories of a great show. Married with Children.
Thank you.
Ed O'Neill, was it?
It was Ed O'Neill, fantastic actor. So
that's some great work in Modern Family.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was reminded of Tanya and Nathan because there was we talked about great photos last week, and there was a really touching photo of her trying to console Bucks after, oh, look, I think, what, 2002? Would it have been that one?
2002, yeah.
Yeah, and he was crushed, and you could see it. And, you know, as any wife would, she tried to calm or make her man feel better, but geez, she was up against it. There was nothing she could have done.
The word inconsolable just springs to mind. And obviously, another great photo that obviously we touched on that last week was the photo of Paul Licuria and Mick Malthouse. Paul Licuria playing in that grand final, absolutely in tears. He just let his emotions run free. And Mick Malthouse, you know, the father figure, the coach, you know, put his arm around him and said, you know, it's tough, but you just got to suck it up. So, yeah. Look, I just wanted to mention, Tone, and you'll love this. As far as the ecstasy goes on moving clubs, now this guy wore Bruce Doull's number.
Yes.
At the Mighty Blues, a much loved player at Melbourne. He came over from Western Australia. He played state cricket with Western Australia, and his nickname was the Duke.
Oh,
a great man.
The Duke of Earl, the great Earl Spalding.
Yeah. So he played in that drubbing Melbourne Cops in 1988 against the Hawks.
Yep.
So obviously he got to the big dance, but no cigar. And then he played in that unbelievable Carlton team of 1995, where they were just the best team all year. I think they only lost 2 games to.
They did lose 2 games.
Hilda and Sydney.
Geez, you're good. You're very good.
Yeah.
The highlight of the great Earl Spalding that year was about 5 minutes into the grand final, and he affected this smother. He just came out of nowhere, and it just said the Blues are switched on. They're here to play, and you know, that's the sort of stuff that, you know, gets you out of your seat. It was just a great bit of football from Earl Spalding. Apart from anything else that he did at the club, he was a fantastic player at Carlton. But that is my enduring memory of him and his contribution. Apart from everything else he did that day, but it just, that to me said, okay, Carlton are on. And
one of those rare players, Tone, as well as being a great clubman. I know Earl pretty well. He's just a fantastic guy. He played 109 games at Melbourne, and he also played 102 games with the Blues. So one of those rare players that have played 100 games at 2 different clubs. So
am I right then in thinking, Troy, he has his name on 2 lockers at 2 clubs?
You are 100% right. Yep. With the Demons, as I said, he came over from Western Australia, and he played some great football for Melbourne, and he played some even better football with the Blues, and a fan favourite at both clubs.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly wish him well.
I've got another Carlton one for you, Tone.
All right, I want to hear this, please, Troy.
Okay. Do you remember a guy? He's another one who started at Melbourne, started his career in 1969 and finished it at the D's in 1980. Played 224 games for Melbourne, which is a great effort.
Yeah.
The following year, he went to Carlton and played in that 1981 flag. Wore the number 1 Guernsey.
Oh, okay.
And blonde hair.
Yeah.
Greg Wells.
Oh, okay, right. No, that's a dim memory, I've got to say.
Tremendous player, and capped off his career with a flag after playing with Melbourne for that period of time with absolutely no success at all. So that was ecstasy for Gregory Wells.
That it says a lot where they give you the number 1 jumper at Carlton, or where they give you the number 1 jumper at any club, Troy. So,
great tradition at Carlton, isn't it, with Serge and Stephen?
Well, yes, it's officially the Silvani families to give away, it has to be said. If we can just circle back to players who stayed loyal. I know there are others, and we will get back to them, who got off sinking ships, if you will, to get on rising ships.
Yeah.
There was an interesting story, but I guess a corollary of what we're talking about is players who stay with clubs despite the temptations. Let's talk about Robert Harvey. His phenomenal career I guess he's somewhat comparable to Cade Simpson at Carlton, in that you're evergreen, you stay good for a very long time, but that final success eludes you.
Yeah, I think the thing with Robert Harvey, Tone, Robert Harvey was a sensational player pretty much from day one.
Yeah.
And he played in successful St Kilda teams that had a chance to win a premiership.
Well, 97, wasn't it?
Yeah, yep. And obviously that kept the flame alive. He didn't go through an extended period where they were cellar dwellers.
Okay, yep.
So obviously one of the greatest players ever to put on a jumper full stop, Jill Brownlow medalist, won multiple St Kilda best and fairest, tremendous state player. But I think Robert Harvey had that St Kilda DNA in him, and that was going to be his club from start to finish, even though he would have been offered a king's ransom from other clubs that were successful. I think with Cade Simpson, Cade grew into being a terrific player.
Yeah.
Obviously, he had an inauspicious start, and then obviously he gained confidence. And, to play 300 games of league football is just an amazing accomplishment. So Cade, obviously, the number 6 Guernsey, worn by Matt Claphay.
Premiership player from WA, speaking of Earl Spalding.
In that 95 premiership team. But Robert Harvey, what a great example that is of staying loyal and, as you said, Tone, sticking fat.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Can you give us a couple of examples there, Troy, of players who might fit into column A or column B and what we're talking about?
Yeah, well, a favourite of mine in the 70s, another Melbourne player. He played from 65 to 1976 with the D's. He played 226 games all up, which is a fantastic effort. The following year, he went to North Melbourne.
Yep.
1977. Does that ring a bell? 1977 North Melbourne.
Yes.
Grand final, drawn grand final, replay, premiership. Stan Alves.
Stan Alves.
Who later
coached back in St Kilda again. All right.
Yeah.
I have no idea about his playing career. Of course, to me, he'll just always be the coach of St Kilda. But that 200 plus games, that's incredible.
He was a tremendous player, Tone Stan Alves, make no mistake about it. Wore the number 2 Guernsey for the Roos, and he was pivotal in those the grand final win, and also he played very well in the drawn grand finals. So the end of Stan Alves' career, after pretty much a lot of misery at the D's, playing in those super teams that North Melbourne had during the 70s, and just capped off his career beautifully.
My favourite story about the drawn grand final, which was against Collingwood, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Got a family connection there too, Tone.
If you want to tell us about that now, and then I'll tell you my story.
Just a quick one. My brother-in-law, Arnold Brightus, he was the villain in the drawn grand final, kicking 7 points. Oh. He come out the next week in the replay and slotted through 5 goals with a best on-ground performance.
If you don't mind.
Yeah. So that was an interesting time in the Brightus and Zantuck households at the time. Yeah.
I can imagine it was. I worked with a colleague on radio many years ago, told this story of an Italian wedding that took place, and they were all insane Collingwood supporters.
Is there any other kind?
Thank you. But so the bride-to-be did a lot of the organisation with her mother, and they booked it in the week after the grand final, as you would.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds
sensible.
Logic.
Win, lose or draw. I'm sorry, win or lose. There was going to be an outcome. Thank you. So scheduled for the Saturday, the wedding.
Yeah.
The best man had a tranny tucked into his tuxedo with an earpiece.
Secret Service style.
Listening to the game. So as the priest was reading the rites, there'd be an elbow, meaning goal, or whatever. And then apparently the reception was the last quarter of the game, and the most depressed wedding reception in history.
No doubt it would have been, Tone. Yeah.
So it's all in the timing, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And I've got another. It's very interesting that I had relatives who booked their wedding for that particular weekend, and Essendon Colling, Essendon, the preliminary final where West Coast drew with Collingwood.
Yeah.
So they had to play that again, and the grand final in 1990 got moved back a week.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay, right. The final siren, Darren Malone holding the ball, grand final.
That's the one, 1990.
God, okay. Yeah, well,
played with a broken thumb that day.
I don't think there would have been too many Pies fans who would have been upset about that. That was, I remember being in Collingwood on that day at the Toad Hotel.
Okay.
It was an extraordinary place to be that day. It was amazing. So, can you give us one other player then, Troy? And I'm going to give you another idea. I've got one written down here that I'd like to talk about, but another player who may have successfully chased glory, because I find those stories just as interesting as those who jump ship and only to have the move not pay off.
Yeah, well, another North Melbourne. This guy was a superstar with South Melbourne early on in his career. He played 260 games for the Bloods, 63 to 1972. He went to North under the famous 10-year rule with Barry Davis and Doug Wade. Yep. And he played in North Melbourne's historic 1975 flag. Yep. His name was John Rantel.
Okay.
Mopsy Rantel. And then he went back to South Melbourne after that premiership glory. So he went back to his roots and he played with South Melbourne, and then he finished his career with Fitzroy. But those couple of years that he played with North, he just found that sweet spot where they had an unbelievable team, that 1975 premiership team in North Melbourne. Probably one of the greatest assembled teams of champion players ever to go around, and he was part of that incredible back line. Yeah, Mopsy Rantel.
Okay, so that's 75.
Yes.
When Fitzroy were into year 31 of their premiership hangover.
Yes, that's a great 1944. That's right. And I think 1944. Yeah.
What I love about that was they chose the year when the ranks of potential players were thinned by the year of heaviest fighting in World War II.
Yes.
to then win a grand final. It's not. I mean, if you ask me, it's hardly the most prestigious year to win one. But anyway, that may be a cheap shot. But others would say a grand final is a grand final, come what may.
I love you, Carlton supporters. You know, you're unbelievable, Tone. Seriously. All the Fitzroy supporters out there, 1944, what a great year. We got up. It was our last flag before that. Those Super Brisbane teams come along, and you're just sticking the boots in.
Yeah. Sorry.
From the top tier of the old Robert Heatley stand. You're unbelievable.
Now, players.
Now, who have you got for me? For me?
Well, look, I mean, these are big players. I've got a dog here who's begging for attention.
Now you're having a crack at the Bulldog supporters.
Well, if you're going to interrupt the podcast, you may as well say hello to everyone. That's Alfie, okay?
Alfie,
and he's I don't know, we'll say Bulldog supporter, but Gary Ablett Senior, you've got to talk about as a player who, like Lockett, neither played in successful grand finals. Am I right saying that about Tony Lockett?
Yeah, obviously. Plugger played in that for St Kilda for many years. Just absolutely one of the greatest players ever to play the game. Probably the best full forward ever to play the game, and his record bears that out. I played in the 96 losing grand final for the Swans against North Melbourne. And Gary Ablett Senior, all those losing grand finals that he played in, started his career with the Hawks.
Yep.
And that when he started his career with the Hawks, they just won a string of premierships. right through from 80, to 91.
So Troy, what year did Gary Ablett start at Hawthorn?
Yeah, I reckon it was either 82 or 83 at
Okay,
Hawthorn.
right. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then he obviously went to Geelong, and then he became, in my opinion, the best player ever to play the game. But played in those Geelong teams, highly talented. But as Bill Brownless says quite often, the focus was all around Gary Ablett.
Okay.
Yep. And Billy mentions it all the time, jokingly, that he was the decoy for Gary Ablett. But I suppose when you're funneling in the ball too often, you become too predictable.
Yep.
And obviously, Gary Ablett Senior was 2 and 3 guys be hanging off him. So
well, true, but I mean that Geelong team at that era batted really deep. Bairstow, Couch, Ayres. You could just go on. Well, I know Ayres was coaching, but they had, and Billy Brownless, who was no slouch, obviously.
Yep. Stephen
Yes,
Border Hocking, Gary
exactly.
Hocking. They had a tremendous team.
I mean, the yips that grabbed a hold of Geelong in that decade would have been the undoing of any supporter.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tone. But a really good call on Gary Ablett Senior, and another guy who played for the Magpies, and unfortunately got to 6 grand finals, and didn't get the chocolates in any of them, was Renee Kink, the incredible Hulk. So he obviously the grand final drawn, grand final replay loss. The 1980 grand final against the Tigers, 81.
Yep.
And obviously 83 actually played with Essendon, and they didn't get the chocolates on that occasion either. So just incredible. 79, 80, 81, 83, and both the 77 grand finals. And boy, oh boy, he was a tremendous player, but that's really bad luck.
Hang on, I had no idea. Are you saying that Rene Kink ended up at Essendon?
He actually finished his career at St Kilda.
Okay, right. I was going to say, because if he was at Essendon and retired in 83, they won the next year. That would have been unbearable.
But that's how unlucky he was. Yeah. So he finished his career at the Saints, who weren't travelling the best during the 1980s. So yeah, the 277, 79, 80, 81, and the 83 grand final against the Hawks for the Bombers.
I now have another name on the list here, and I know you will. Well, no list of players who stayed loyal and failed to be rewarded for that loyalty is complete without somebody that we have mentioned on More Than the Score before, but and somebody who you will be able to speak about with some authority, of course, is Robbie Flower.
Yeah, Robbie Flower. Well, say no more about Robbie Flower. Incredible. Made his debut with the Demons as a 17-year-old from Murrumbina. The bespectacled Robbie Flower. He was one of my great friends. I worked with Robbie for many years. Went and watched him as a kid and idolised Robbie, and stayed true to with the D's all throughout his career. Was offered some big dollars to go elsewhere.
Can you get into that at all, Troy? Did he ever reveal or divulge how much churning there was on the inside about any of those offers?
Well, there was no churning. There was no churning at all. He was loyal to Melbourne, and that's where he was going to play. He always said to me, Melbourne gave him the chance.
Yep.
And he was going to repay that faith.
Well, you would argue that Melbourne has more than repaid that faith in him, because he's held in such immense regard at that club. I would imagine he would have been captain of their team of the century.
No. Obviously, Norm Smith was the coach.
Okay.
But Barassi was the main man at Melbourne. But Robbie Flower, the guy, he was a great footballer, but an even better person.
Yep.
He was just an amazing. We lost him too early, Robbie. I get a little bit emotional when I talk about him, but it's a great example of somebody who stayed loyal with the club that gave him the chance. And as you said, Tone, Robbie Flower was much loved and revered by Melbourne supporters, but friends of mine who follow other clubs, you'll ask them that question: who's the guy that you really like watching play from the opposition? And universally, they'll say Robbie Flower.
Well, he was just, he was almost thought up of in a laboratory as just being this honest John who could play. And it reminds me of that nickname that I think Nick Farr-Jones had when he played. His nickname was Nobody because nobody was perfect.
Yeah, nearly. Actually, it was Johnny Hills.
There we go, Johnny Hills. I'm not great on my rugby, but yeah.
That's okay, but nobody's perfect, Tone.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well said.
That's the segue
well
into
said.
that one, mate.
All right, well, in case you get carried away with emotion, let me just bring up Troy Bond, of a player who... Troy Bond.
Great nomination.
We have to talk about a player that... Now, these are players who missed out on grand finals. His story ended up much better than Derek Kickett's, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And what a story that is. But let's talk about Troy Bond as a player who left a club unwillingly. I don't think he wanted to leave Carlton to go to Adelaide, but he did. But as luck would have it, he played in both Adelaide grand finals.
Yeah, well, that's incredible, being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And Troy Bond was a very good player, very, very courageous. And also he was a real, very good distributor of the ball. So it's an amazing. You talk about Derek Kickett. Now, when you talk about agony, that is in spades. Derek Kickett, the Essendon 1990 played in that particular grand final.
Yep.
Obviously, we spoke about the Magpies doing the business over the Bombers in that grand final. Played 77 games for the Bombers between 1990 and 93, and famously played every game in that 93 season, and was left out of the victorious premiership team by Kevin Sheedy. Yeah.
And they didn't speak for how many years?
Oh.
It was over a decade, I'm pretty sure.
Oh.
My memory, Troy, is that after the grand final, Derek Kickett was uncontactable. He'd basically gone bush.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tony.
To deal with it.
Yep. And obviously he got one last crack at it with the Sydney Swans in 96.
Oh, okay.
And again, he had played some wonderful football, played 68 games for the Swans, and just couldn't get there. So a wonderful player, but his career was riddled with heartbreak.
Am I right in remembering the first Essendon-Sydney game after he transferred to Sydney? There was a lot of fire in the Derek Kickett belly, and
there was.
He was.
Let's say a furnace.
Yeah, exactly. He would have taken on every player in the list, friend or foe. I think he was a pretty angry man, and you can.
That's a great memory. Yeah, there was much pent up angst in the Derek Kickett thought processes that day. You're absolutely right.
Well, there were, look, he would say it was an injustice. There were many to do with the 1993 grand final, including Michael Long's goal, which we know was, and I will not rest until we harness technology
Steve Silvani wins.
Steve Silvani
I touched it.
Touch that ball. We have the technology now, Troy.
Yeah. To show that his finger was
record
7 centimetres away from the tip of the ball. Yeah, we have that technology, Tone. Again, Carlton, whinging.
Exactly.
Now, you're going to love this one. Another Carlton player.
Yep.
Started his career at Geelong.
Okay.
I think he played over maybe 10 or over 10 games for the Cats. Then he went to Carlton, the
Yes.
star-studded Carlton team, between 81 and 83, and snagged 2 premierships. Who am I talking about?
Oh, gee, Geelong has been very good to Carlton, can I just say? I was thinking Adrian Hickmont. You started talking about him.
This
But
guy had
it can't be
Italian
him.
heritage.
Italian heritage. Wouldn't be Bortolotto, would it?
Oh,
Jeez, I'm good.
yes. Mario Bortolotto.
There we go.
Yeah. 81, 82 flags. Wouldn't have thought in his wildest dreams, after leaving the Cats with, 14 games up his sleeve, playing in back-to-back flags for the Blues.
That's not a bad legacy to leave behind. I mean, apart from having, one of the more magnificent Italian surnames, it's not. I mean, it's as good as Cottagio as far as Italian surnames go. It's not clubhouse leader like Di Medico, let's be honest, but it's definitely one of the better ones.
I love the way that his Christian name ends in O and his surname ends in O.
That's magnificent. Double nuts, as they say. That's and so then what happened? I mean, 82, Carlton didn't win another premiership. Carlton were in a premiership in 86, didn't win one until 87. What happened to Mario's career after those? After the 2 that he won?
That's a bit of a mystery, Tone, because he played the following year in 83 after the 82 flag, and then either through injury or a massive loss of form, he never played another game of league football again.
Look, it's a cruel game. What can you say? But as you say, given all the number of players who have played and who currently play, there's only a tiny percentage of those who get the honour of having a little school kid put a medal around their neck, as it is now. I've got to say, there's a lot you can knock about the AFL, don't get me wrong, but please don't ever change that particular part of grand final day. I absolutely love that. The fact that a school kid gets to put a premiership medallion around a victorious player's neck, I think it's absolutely wonderful.
It's a memory that they'll cherish for the rest of their lives. Whatever they do, they know that they've been on the dais on grand final day and they've presented a legend of the game with their premiership medallion. Yeah, what a great memory.
Indeed. Well, Troy, we're almost out of time. Unless there was, I know you're a man who does just a phenomenal amount of preparation for this vodcast, more than the score. Are there any other kind of late submissions you might like to make of players who either stuck fat or jumped ship?
Yeah, well, one of the greats of coaching, Mick Malthouse. Started his career with St Kilda.
Yeah.
Played 53 games there. And then he said, well, I'll have a crack with the Tigers, and played in that famous 1980 grand final team, of which they won the premiership.
Yeah.
I think he played over 120 games all up with the Tigers. And what a great story that was, going from St Kilda to the Tigers, playing in a premiership, then moving on post his playing career to coach the Bulldogs.
Yep.
Then coach, obviously, West Coast and coach them to flags.
Yep.
Then he went to Collingwood and won a flag there. And obviously, his career didn't finish too well with the Blues. So, I just thought I'd end it on that note for you, Tone.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Troy. I was going to circle back to Nathan Buckley again, speaking of the heir. He left Brisbane, then got defeated in his grand final dreams by Collingwood, which were coached by the man who coached Collingwood in their 1990 victory.
Yes, Lethal Lee Matthews.
Yeah. Anyway, that's just
6 degrees of separation. The Kevin Bacon formula, the equation, the Drake equation.
It's a tangled web that is weaved, and we are here to unpick it on More Than the Score. Troy, great work as always. We will be back next week with Well, another dissection of the glorious history of the AFL/VFL.
Thanks, Tone.
Troy Zantuck, thanks for joining, thanks for being part of More Than the Score. I'm Tony Moakler, and we'll catch you next week.